What would you do if your computer was hijacked by a hacker? Now imagine the repercussions if they kidnapped the digital information at your workplace with a message: your computer information is being held for ransom. Pay us or you will be locked out forever. Hi everyone, it's Monday, February 21, 2022, and in this podcast, we will be exploring ransomware. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Andrea Chisholm, and I'll be having a discussion with a team of experts from 4 different countries. I'll tell you about those persons in a few minutes. But just to let you know that this podcast is being hosted by Get Safe Online, and it's the UK's leading source of factual and easy to understand information on online safety. Now be sure to check out their website. It's getsafeonline.org, or follow them across social media platforms at GetSafeOnline. I can promise you that if you visit their website, you'll get tons of useful information about cybersecurity. And you will also realize that GetSafeOnline has a presence in at least 24 countries across the world. Now back to our panelists. Today, I'll be speaking with Dr. Dustin Fraser. He is a cyber and information technology risk expert in Guyana. Now, Dr. Dustin Fraser is a Guyana scholar whose interest is developing regional cybersecurity capabilities. He has a bachelor's degree in informatics engineering, a master's in cyber and information security, and a PhD in business analytics and decision sciences. He currently works as a cyber and information technology risk manager. Our second panelist is Nicholas Iradukunda, and he is a security engineer and operations manager in Rwanda. Now, Nicholas is an information security, privacy, and risk management professional with a solid technical background, now serving as a security engineer at KTRN and a operations manager at NextByte, a cybersecurity company. His work revolves around practicing cybersecurity techniques to ensure there is a safer cyberspace. And our third panelist is Sakayo, and he is Sakayo Manoa. Yes, I met him. He is the IT manager for the Solomon Islands. Sakayo is an experienced information communication technology specialist with a history of working in the computer and network security industry. He is currently the ICT manager at Forum Fisheries Agency in the Solomon Islands, and he is also an ambassador for Get Safe Online and holds a master's in cybersecurity from the Charles Stewart University. And our fourth panelist is Jobens Manoa. Not sure if he's related to Sakayo, but he is the principal IT officer in Samoa. Now, he's an experienced information communication technology specialist with a history of working as well in the cybersecurity industry. He has worked in the ICT industry in both the private and public sector for over 10 years. Jobens is currently the principal IT officer for the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Labor, and is part of the Government of Samoa's IT Technical Working Group. He is also the Vice President of Samoa IT Association and an ambassador for Get Safe Online. Jobens holds the Masters of Cybersecurity from the University of Bakio in New Zealand. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, Andrea.
All right, we're going to start off with you, Dustin. Tell us what exactly is ransomware?
Sure. We look at it from the textbook description. Ransomware is a type of malicious software. It's part of the malware family, and it actually prevents you from accessing files on your computers, your systems, or even your networks. The goal of ransomware is to request a payment in return for access to those files. The ransomware attack usually starts by encrypting essential files and ultimately disrupting business operations, especially to critical services. The access to critical information is reduced, and so businesses are put in a dilemma either to pay the ransom or not to pay the ransom.
All right, so we see where money is involved in ransomware, but you mentioned an interesting word, encrypted. With you, Sakayo, how do these hackers usually gain access to people's systems to do that?
Well, thank you very much, Andre. There are various ways that they can actually get into your system. Normally, they will use phishing emails where they send you an email and with an attachment, and if people are not careful, they will actually open up that email and go into the attachment, being curious what's been sent to them. And once they click that attachment with a malware embedded on that attachment, then that's when they get infected. The other options or other areas where you normally get the ransomware is through online advertising, where they use malware advertising, where they embedded a malware in an ad online advert. When you click on it, then it will actually get your computers infected. The normal, what I would say that the normal trend is normally through vulnerabilities, where software has vulnerabilities and people are using it and they don't do updates, and that will actually be one of the pathway where ransomware will enter a system where systems are not being properly patched. There are still vulnerabilities in the system where people are not aware of, and once they have those vulnerabilities in the system, then the hackers can actually have access to the system. Thank you.
All right, so Sakayo mentioned phishing emails, online advertisements, and software vulnerabilities. Nicholas, care to weigh in? Any other ways in which the hackers gain access to people's systems or data?
I think Sakayo mentioned all of them, and the major ones are through phishing and them tricking you to click on something, tricking you to install a malicious software without you knowing that behind the scenes it's going to be running a few other scripts or a few other unwanted things. Well, you'll be there downloading maybe the latest Windows 11 file without you knowing they have installed something in the background, and when you just click it in the hopes of having the newest Windows operating system, something else is being run in the background. So in a nutshell, Saka mentioned many of them, and the essence here is them gaining your trust and then letting you do things you never thought you were doing in the first place.
All right, thank you, Nicholas. There's an interesting one that often comes up, and it has to do with aspects of social engineering. Anybody wants to jump in on that? Perhaps you, Joe Benz?
Sure, thanks, Andrea. Yeah, the social aspect of it is very real in the Pacific. These, well, we call them criminals. These criminals tend to go for the vulnerability area. So for the Pacific, it might be money, through campaigns of winning money or winning a lottery ticket. Those are the most easiest way to have somebody click on a link. So they tend to go specifically target vulnerable people, and they some other examples will be duplicated email from a bank. It's mostly to do with trying to target vulnerable people. So I guess the social aspect of it is very real, and that's where these criminals tend to target. Yeah, thanks.
Dustin, how would social media fit into all this? Because, we're all connected nowadays. Everybody's on the platforms, whether it's, for example, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the other popular ones. How does it fit into this discussion about social engineering and hackers gaining access to people's information?
Sure. As Sakayo mentioned, all right, the attackers actually attempt to use advertising or advertising campaigns. And of course, on social media, that's where you reach a large population of people, especially for regular reputable brands. In addition to reputable brands, malicious threat actors can use social media to actually deploy their malware exploits. And as was previously mentioned, those exploits are embedded in JavaScript code that sits on websites. And the goal is to get you to access that website. Once access that website, the JavaScript code will execute, scan that system to see if it's vulnerable, what vulnerabilities are available. And in some cases, they exploit that, right? And so there are two methods, right? There's one where it's an adversary controlled, where there's a direct hacking, or it's an adversary release delivery, right? Generally through that phishing or through that malicious payload that may exist within a advertising website. And so, we think of social media, yes, as it's supporting some of our social functions and daily activities, but it's also a place or a whaling type of place where malicious attackers could use those platforms to exploit vulnerable systems or large populations of vulnerable systems.
Is there any way, because we know that scams happen in different forms. So for example, persons may call someone pretending to be someone, or let's put it in an organizational setting. Is it possible by any chance for a hacker from another section of an organization to call someone in another part of the world trying to pretend as if they're one person to gain access to that organization system?
That's true. That is correct. And so what occurs, especially in those situations, is that those hackers have done a lot of their reconnaissance activities. It's not just a situation where they just make a call. It's where they have identified that organization. They've identified areas where there are gaps in security, and especially a human aspect of it, right? Human social engineering. They've identified that there's a gap there and that there's an opportunity to exploit those individuals. And so that attacker, in some cases, there is cold calling, but in some cases, there are direct targeted approaches. So yes, that does occur. And of course, they'll mimic someone with authority within that organization. They'll create a sense of urgency so as to get the person on the other end to fall victim to their scam.
Thank you. And you mentioned another important word that we'll get to later on, that matter of urgency. Scammers telling you that you really need to do something at this point to gain access to your system. Now, so we spoke about different ways in which persons can get access to your networks and ending up in a ransomware attack. Now, let's look at some of the impact of ransomware. For example, in 2021, news coming out of the United States about a Colonial Pipeline, that's a company, it was hit by a ransomware cyber attack. Now, there was a cyber criminal gang called DarkSide, which took responsibility for the hacking. The BBC reported at the time that the Colonial Pipeline carried 2.5 million barrels a day. And the result is that the US fuel prices at the pump rose 6 cents per gallon on the week after the cyber attack. Whoa. So we can see here that cyber attacks in the form of a ransomware can also affect critical national infrastructure, and it can also filter down to consumers and the average man on the street being impacted, because you see that persons in the US had to pay more for gas at the pump. Let's speak a little bit more about the impact, starting with you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Andrea. So like you mentioned, the impact of ransomware is very critical, and it always varies depending on the sector. We were lucky that time that it was a gas industry being affected. There was another ransomware, but whereby now it infected healthcare systems. Imagine if someone was on a critical machine and was being administered oxygen, and then the machine had to stop because the computer running it is not functioning correctly. People would be in a critical position. Other than that, now companies might face penalties for not being compliant as a result of the attack. They might lose money. If they happen to pay the ransom, they might also their name might be crushed at the stocks, and then them losing trust of their clients, the brand being tarnished, and then at the end of the day, companies might even close doors. So now coming to the individual perspectives, you might lose your profile. I mean, you might lose your files, your most critical files, them being your credit card details, them being your other very critical information. So if you've lost such kinds of information, someone might be out there again, then impersonate yourself using your information that nobody else out there knows about you, and then impersonate yourself. Thank you.
Right. Sakayo, I don't know if you want to speak a little about your jurisdiction or if you want to broaden it, any impact of ransomware attacks.
Thank you. I would say, you will definitely lose your reputation, because people will you lose your customers too, and the trust that people had in you. Like, for instance, if you for perspective for regional organizations, we provide the service to the members, and if you're not careful in ensuring that you have a secure network or infrastructure, then the impact will be people they will just lose their trust in you. So that's one impact that I think it's important. Your reputation is on the line, because people will not, even though you will say, oh, it wasn't my fault, but then what is done is done. The damage is there. So that's my take on is that your reputation is definitely on the line, and people will never trust you. So that's something that it's the biggest impact for ransomware on the business. It's your reputation, and on the individual, you lose a lot, because like you lose your information, your data, because you end up not paying the ransom because you can't afford it. So you'll have your data or information lost forever. Thanks.
All right, Jabez?
I think the team here covered most of the what would happen. Yeah, I guess it's more of that reputation and your background, and also the data that's been lost. Yeah, thanks, Andrea.
All right, Jabez, I understand. If someone says something already, you leave it there. Now, let me just put in something about the impact of ransomware. Now, in doing some bit of research, Security Intelligence reported some statistics from Cybersecurity Ventures, and they said that ransomware costs are expected to reach about $265 billion by 2031. And it's estimated that there will be a new attack every 2 seconds. So we can see here that it's not something that's just being plucked out of thin air rather. It is happening. Even Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organization, it called for police agencies worldwide to form a global coalition with industry partners to prevent a potential ransomware pandemic. Dustin, I don't know if you want to speak about the context in Guyana.
Sure, I would love to do that. But going back to your earlier point, speaking about the Colonial Pipeline, and I'll cascade down. You think about the Colonial Pipeline and its delivery of the gas to gas stations and those requiring that service. And then you saw in the news the impact it had, right? People were actually fighting over gas, long lines of cars and trucks waiting to be served. We start to see that there was a direct economic impact. The price of gas went up. And then we start to see that there was a social challenge where people actually fought and created downstream impact. But then when you start to think about ransomware and its downstream impact, there is a direct economic impact, whether it's in increased cost or whether it's in loss of business. And so, when we think about that challenge there in the United States, it was a super large scale challenge. In Guyana, for example, in 2019, the Guyana Power Light was hit by a ransomware attack. And the challenge there is that the Guyana Power Light, like I was mentioned before, can they afford to pay the ransom? And in most cases, the answer is no, because the value of that data may not outweigh the price that they're calling for in the ransom. And so what Guyana elected to do was not to pay that data, to rely on their backups, but ultimately contain those systems, remediate them, and ultimately bring those services back online. The challenge, though, was that for several days in February of 2019, they weren't able to service new clients. And so there was another impact to the social structure where people who were seeking service could not get it. And, we think of someone seeking service and we think about from a Uganda's context. You may have a shop, you may have a young child, you may have a need, whatever. We all have grown to depend on electricity. But at the end of the day, there was both an economic and a social impact affecting individuals.
And we spoke at length about the economic, and as some of our panelists mentioned earlier, in terms of reputational damage as well, that can be a part of it. Now, here's a tricky one. Should persons, if their data is being held at ransom, should they pay for that? Should they pay the ransom fee? Nicholas, is your hand up for you to answer? Your thoughts?
I was doing thumbs down just to say no. Well, for the fact that if you're paying for a ransomware, for a ransom, it means that you're rewarding the hackers, like you're giving them something. And actually, somebody said that if no one was to pay them, they would definitely go out of business and close door. There would be no more ransomware in the future. Another thing is that you stand fewer chances of getting your files back. So you're not actually sure that they're going to give you the decrypting key for your encrypted files. So one, don't pay them, just don't give them the salary of the next month. Again, you shouldn't trust them that they're going to give you back the key. So nobody should pay the ransomware. But one more thing, Andrea, is that for you not to pay them is that you have to be sure that you have means of getting back your files. Now, something critical, Dustin mentioned it, is that you have to have backups, and those backups should be tested as often as you can to make sure that even if your files are encrypted, you have something in the back that's going to save your life.
We can talk more about backup later on. Any differing view from that of Nicholas? Or we're all unanimous here in the suggestion not to pay the hackers?
Yeah, Andrea, it's one of those Hollywood movies where you get the president online and you go, oh, we don't negotiate with terrorists. So it's one of those things that you never pay the ransom. One of the other things that you have to be careful on is the threat of being a ransomware, which is really not a ransomware. They're just, making a threat to your organization, to yourself, that they're encrypting your files, but it's not really a ransomware. It's just, a threat. So you just pay up money, but you're not really, effective with the ransomware. Yeah, just another point on that one. Thanks.
Okay, but I can see here, I saw an article from Bloomberg that listed an insurance company in the United States, CNA Financial Corp, which paid $40 million in late March, that was last year, to 2021 to be exact, to regain control of its network after a ransomware attack, according to some of the people with knowledge of that attack. So I guess it comes back to the point about backup. And I guess despite the advice from the experts, persons will eventually do what they think is in their best interest, but our experts said it, don't pay them if you're fueling the cyber attacks. All right, let's broaden the discussion a bit to talk about, should I say, protecting people's intellectual property and data in the digital space. There was a point made earlier about email phishing, in which that's one of the ways people gain access to your data. How can I prevent that phishing? Let's go with you, Dustin.
Sure. It's very simple. If you receive unsolicited email, which do not describe any activity in your life, do not respond, do not particularly click on the links that are embedded in there. Very important, we tend to be enticed by these emails, or we're curious, and that curiosity is actually what causes us to click on that malicious link and the consequences that follow if it's a malicious payload.
That's a valid point, Dustin. I recall that a few months ago, I was in the UK and I got an email from somebody in my organization, and it looked legitimate. saying, hi, can you do so and so? But I'm like, why would she email me about this with such words at this point? It seems, should I say, fishy? That's what we would say in Jamaica. And so I took up the phone and I gave her a call. And it was at that time we could have said, oh, we had to report this to our IT department so that they could sort out any potential hazards there. So how important is it for persons to have that right security mindset? What are some of the things you should be looking out for?
Sure. And right there speaks to your awareness and maybe the success of the awareness program within your organization. Those are, we may think that the email always has to come from an external source. No, it can come from an internal source also, which tells us something that internally there are either insider threats or our systems have been compromised and threat actors are actually following our emails, following the pattern of discussion that's occurring within those emails. And that's generally what's occurring currently with these type of exchange attacks or email attacks. The attackers aren't only just sending a phishing email, they're exploiting these systems and they're following the conversations that are occurring. And so you want to look out for emails that are unsolicited, emails that contain information that you may not quite trust, the urgency and some sense of hierarchy where your manager or a director is forcing you to do something like you did, right? You did the right thing. You reached out to that person by phone, which was no harm, and you verified, was this legitimate? And so we want to be aware of it, right? And we want to have, as part of our information security awareness programs, have these scenarios play out to our workers so they can understand and they're able to identify when these situations occur.
Okay, so organizational readiness is important from that aspect in terms of making sure that employees are aware as to what to look out for and when to double check. Earlier, we talked about online advertisement. In this age of datafication where all your data is being collated and the companies are targeting you and you're just clicking as you scroll across social media. Let's go to you, Sakayo. How do I know which ad I should click on? Because I'm on IG, I'm on Instagram, I'm scrolling, and then because I searched for shoes in my search engine on Google, all of a sudden I'm on Instagram scrolling and I get an ad advertising the latest pair of stiletto. That's tempting me to click and buy it. How do I know if that ad is actually correct or not? What do I do?
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. I think it's important the point that Dustin raised. Like if you work for an organization, it has to become part of a culture. That organization has to build a culture, a security culture, because if you allow your users or employees to know what their responsibilities are, then that will actually expand to your family, because you actually the culture, the security culture in the office. Then it's whether it's an email or an advertisement that's coming through with all those ads. If you've done your homework, or if the organization has done its homework, build that culture into their employees, make that the employee as valuable assets rather than security. What do you say? Yeah, you need to build that culture so that the employees will be able to actually determine or be able to actually know exactly if the email comes or an advert is being sent to them. They know for sure. They've got spelling mistakes, on the ads and on the emails. The attachment, they look at it. It's remember, these hackers, they are professional. They've done their job. They look, they research, and they know exactly what they need to send to you. So you need to be aware of these tactics. And one of them, you need to look at those. They sometimes make mistakes by spelling mistakes, and also something that you picked up. Say they're asking you to the adverts, but then if you've done your homework, the employer using the awareness training to build the capacity, then as an employee you will be able to actually pick those things up. I hope that
All right.
answers your question.
All right, let's see if Nicholas can add to that. He mentioned spelling mistakes in some of these ads that you may see online as a possible red flag. Anything else?
Yeah, well, I personally don't like going shopping with the people who come to me. I prefer going to them. So I know where I should find the shoes I'm looking for. If it is on Amazon or anywhere else, I know where I should find them. So if I'm on IG and scrolling, I should be looking at photos, not shoes, not ads of people trying to sell me stuff. So if I'm in Instagram, I should take my time, do my search and stuff on IG, and then when it's time to buy now, go back to Amazon or to the shop and do that. Again, if those websites are not protected, like if you go to the website and the website is not verified or secure enough, you stand a chance of losing your credit card information at the point of buying. So again, should you do so, again, remember to check if the websites are legitimate. Allow me to mention something else that Dustin touched a bit, is that the multi-factor authentication. Like employees, like you said, you had a chance and called your friend back to confirm if it was her email to you. Now, what would have happened if you had clicked on the link unknowingly? The Colonial CEO mentioned that the fault was due to a VPN that was not having a multi-factor authentication. So if companies are teaching us to use these features, if applications have these features, we should use these features. Thank you.
Just to quickly pick up on two things that you touched on, Nicholas. You first mentioned about the website being legitimate. We know sometimes persons do impersonations quite well, but as a general rule, what are some of the things you can look for to figure out if a website is secure enough?
Well, number one, they mentioned it is the spelling. Amazon should not end with an M, just to mention. Again, there is a green padlock or a green sentence that starts the name of the website. So if you have that green part of it, and you should check its certificate if it is internationally recognized, and then you should be good to go.
Dustin, he mentioned MFA, multi-factor authentication. How does that work?
Sure. We think of multi-factor authentication as a secondary approach to authenticating into a system, whereby you've got a third source that verifies your identity. For example, you can have a code that is sent to your phone. Now, the general authentication where you enter your username and password, that sits within the application, right? And it seeks to both identify you with your username and give you the authorizations once you enter. But what occurs is before that process is actually successful, it sends you a code, you validate it on, or a link, in some cases, you validate that externally. A token is then sent back to say, yes, this person validated themselves externally, whether through a text or a link, and then the authentication process continues, as you click on that submit with your username and password.
Right, so it's having different sources of verification, so to speak, and different layers.
And additional, yes. And it generally only speaks to that part where you're looking to one, identify, authenticate, and then later authorize, right? In that process where you get access to your critical data within an application, just within that area, not necessarily the impact after you've been authenticated into the system.
Jobens, we spoke earlier about software vulnerabilities. At times as users, we just go online and download something because we're trying to get something free as particular software to use on our desktops or whichever gadgets that we're using. How do you guard against this?
Well, I guess, we have cert teams and websites that, have already filtered out kind of softwares that it's safe to use. For example, we have, computer response team websites around the region. So you can go there and check on which softwares, or even Get Safe Online. Get Safe Online has a very good list of applications and softwares that you can that's safe to download and use. So I guess that's one area that you can go to and visit, just to be on the safe side. I just want to touch back on the topics that you just previously had. I think mentioned was culture and awareness. In our region, the Pacific region, I think that's one of the most critical parts that we need to push out to our people, is that awareness of what to look for, what to look out for. You touched about websites, yes, the certificates. It's all visual, so I think that's one way to simplify it for our people, is that look, be cautious of what you're clicking on, just to have a second look before you click. The other thing is that the best example that I like to use when I try and deliver some awareness programs to our people is, when you get an email saying that you won the lotto, but you haven't really bought a ticket. So how can you win a lotto when you haven't bought a ticket? There's one of the things is just to get people to think logically about what they're doing. I think that's it's that building of awareness and that culture, that security culture that Sasaka has mentioned. Yep, thanks.
All right, Nicholas, back to the issue of organizational readiness. We mentioned about training employees. We also spoke about backup systems. Could you just delve a little deeper into some examples of backup systems that employers should have, and any other aspects of cybersecurity readiness that any company should be having at this point?
Thank you, Andrea. I think the issue, I wouldn't point the issue at the organizations, but rather to the employees of the organizations, because much of the times the organization give out the awareness sessions, and then it stands now, the ball is now in the field of the employees to actually implement what they were taught. So if there's an MFA session, I should implement the MFA. If there's anything else, I should really employ it. So again, now to the, would you please remind me the second one? The backups, yes, thank you. Now, there are a couple of ways of doing backups. Number one, there are two different ways. One, you might take a backup of the whole data, or of all the data you have, and that could be done probably at the end of the week or at the end of a month. But again, daily, there should be incremental backups that should be taken on something different that was added on the data you had the previous day. And then a very critical point is now, how do you keep the backups, and then how do you test the backups? Because it is one thing having the backups, and then at the end of the day, when you're going to use them, you find out the files were not ready to be used. So you should test your backups, and then be ready, you should know where to keep them. They should be kept separately from where you normally use your systems. Because if it was a flood, leave alone the ransomware, if there was something physical to damage the systems, your backups should also be ready to serve you, being in a remote area. Thank you.
Any other tips you want to put in for employers/employees?
Well, so for employers now, it is to enforce the sessions, the awareness, and make sure what they are teaching the employees, they're really getting them. Because many employees only get to those trainings when the email is telling them, you can't really open this thing before you finish this training. You can't really go to the next month before you finish this training. Now, there should be ways that employees run drills and then see how ready their employees are. Okay. Thank you.
Picking up from Nicholas's last point, Dustin, do security audits have a role to play here?
Sure, of course. We think security audits are that third line of defense, right? You've got your core operations, you've got your core compliance, and of course, you've got audits that actually come as that third line of defense to verify that you are actually, or the controls are actually working as expected, or they are implemented, and that they're the measures of performance are such that it's acceptable to the organization. The challenge there, though, is that when you think of it from the organizational perspective, You want to ensure, even before you get to audits, that you're addressing risk properly, right? And we usually think of risk from two perspectives: risk as avoidance or risk as acceptance. And so our security controls, whether it's our IT general controls or whether we're developing information security systems specific to maybe ISO 27001 or any type of regulatory standard, you want to ensure that your performance are such that you are holistically addressing security from your policy right through to your education with regard to the technology that you're using to deliver your critical services.
Let's look a bit about in terms of from a policy standpoint. Thinking of Guyana, talk to me a bit about governmental, should I say, readiness, so to speak? I don't think that's a correct term, but in terms of how governments help to shape the cybersecurity landscape to make it better for companies and individuals to operate.
Awesome. And so that's a very good question. And it's different. We think of Guyana as part of CARICOM. CARICOM has a cybersecurity action plan, which kind of sets the roadmap for Caribbean countries. However, implementing that action plan isn't necessarily a consensus. And so each country, based on their different or their situation or their contextual environment, require different sets of security practices. And so from a government perspective, we now realize, if we look at the CARICOM region, we know Jamaica, we know Trinidad have implemented cybersecurity strategies. So it starts with that hierarchy, that strategy that defines what we're looking to accomplish. And that's where the government, from a national security perspective, defines that strategy. That strategy encompasses whole of country, right? But whole of country is separated into public sector and private sector. Within the private sector, each organization have their individual mandates, their opinions on what business growth is based on their services. Within the public sector, however, they've got a responsibility, yes, for the public sector, in addition to the private sector. And so what needs to occur initially, especially for CARICOM countries, is that the public and private sector understand that they both use the same critical infrastructure, that they define what that critical infrastructure is to the country. They define separate roles and responsibilities and the amount of work each would take on, and ultimately drive a holistic strategy that supports them both protecting critical infrastructure. And so governments need to create that initial investment, show the country that, hey, we're willing to invest in cybersecurity from the perspective of policy, from the strategy again, policy, ensuring that we've established standards, and ultimately create an ecosystem where they provide finances, right? It all boils down to finances to support that ecosystem, whether it's through training, whether it's through creating new organizational roles, or whether it's through creating advanced CERT teams that was mentioned, but not just CERT teams, that they have a CERT team that's central to the entire country, that within each organization, each sector, there are teams that are capable of delivering cybersecurity as a service organization.
You mentioned the cybersecurity strategy in CARICOM, because we know that there was a cybersecurity and cybercrime action plan within the CARICOM region. How should I say ready or behind is the CARICOM region at this point? What should we be doing even more urgently? I know you mentioned the public and private sector partnership, but what do you think is one of the most urgent things that should be done at this point?
Most urgently, and this is not necessarily something, my research has covered this area, but I'm taking this from the National Cybersecurity Index. And on the National Cybersecurity Index, you could see various countries across the world, and we can see that there are several indicators that are essential. My understanding, based on my work, is that CARICOM countries need to define what's critical. For example, Jamaica has defined within its cybersecurity strategy that the business process outsourcing is essential as part of their economic development, and so they have identified that as a critical sector. Trinidad and Tobago has identified oil and gas as a critical sector, in addition to energy, manufacturing, etc. And so CARICOM countries need to individually define what is critical to their economy. Most of the countries are CARICOM-based, are tourism-based, and so tourism may be a very important area to focus on how to protect, like we discussed earlier, right? Payment card systems, etc. And so if we also look at the National Cybersecurity Index, we'll see that from a baseline perspective, policy development, threat analysis and information, education, and ultimately protecting digital services from a social and felt perspective are essential. And of course, they go on into other indicators.
All right, Nicholas?
Thank you, Andrea. So back here in East Africa, like speaking to my country, Rwanda is currently now in the phase 1, if not 2, of the data protection law, where now it's into the process of the first phase of developing, I believe, if I'm correct, was completed. Now it's into the part of executing the law, and then teaching the people how they should respond to the law. And the law touches to the companies, how they should behave, leave alone the regulators pushing and always on the necks of the companies, telling them what they should do, how compliant they should be, standards they should be compliant with. There should be also readiness into the users of the data. I mean, the general public at large. They should know what to do or when to do it and how best to do it. Thank you.
All right, Jobens?
Well, for Samoa, we are moving towards having a legislation in place. I think the government is looking towards, I think they're in draft mode at the moment for a bill. But it's good to have that national level of policy in place. As I said, these are criminals, so we need to have that firm whip on these people. So I think it's good direction for Samoa moving towards the future of but now, especially in times of COVID, everything is dependent on ICT. So we need a strong overall national policy that covers these kind of cyber crimes. Yeah. Thanks, Andrea.
Okay, Sakayo?
Yeah, thank you very much, Andre. I think there are a couple of important points that Dustin raised. The first one is to do with the standards. I work for a regional organization, and the important thing here in the Pacific is our ocean, our fish. So it's not $1 million industry; it's $1 billion industry. So it's important that we protect those interests of the members. So when it comes to dealing with policies, it's important that we have within at the national level in terms of fisheries their ISMS policies. So that's why I encourage, or I look at adopting a standard. So we actually looking at the ISO 2701, because if we are to do an audit of penetration testing, then we are actually following a standard that will make life a lot easier. When we do the auditing, then we follow a standard that when the auditors come in, they will do the audit according to that standard. So it's important to adopt a standard like the ISO 2701, because it has the ISMS policy in it, which includes everything. So from here in the Pacific, from my experience, that's the way we are going, because we need to ensure that the industry, the fisheries industry, is well protected. Like I said, it's $1 billion industry. If we just let everybody do things on a ad hoc basis, then they will lose a lot, and not in millions but in billions of dollars. So it's an industry that we encourage, or at the national level, to at least have those ISMS policies in place. Thanks.
All right, Dustin, from your research, do you come across anything to support the fact that some companies may be reluctant to formally report ransomware attacks to the police?
Well, yes. Specifically in our region, and I won't necessarily say which country, there isn't no reporting mandate. So there, cybercrime, yes, there is a cybercrime unit within our police force. But then in some cases, organizations, whether public or private, do not want to report because they lack faith that these individuals have the requisite skills to help them. They also don't want to report because it will have a reputational impact. And in our small countries, it's very easy to lose business. And if you were to, for example, go online and Google bankguianachange.org, you will see from a social impact that organizations are exploited, and that organization has never reported per se. But then you start to see from the comments and those who are signing that change.org petition to get that institution to report and enact changes. And because there are no laws, then there's no need for that organization to make a report. And there is no one to actually mandate them one, and there's no repercussion. And so if you look at the updated comments, it's something that's occurring year in and year out. And so that is where the challenge is.
So a lack of laws, that's a
correct.
part of it. And
Yeah.
we made mention of the data protection legislation. And I guess if it's not there and if it's not enforced, that may have other repercussions. Because I was wondering, for example, if you think of a bank, shouldn't customers have a right to know if their data was compromised or not?
That's correct. And we know that their data was compromised because they made purchases in very large amounts that were unsolicited and they never received the product. So they never intended to do that. In some cases, in Guyana particularly, people go to the ATM machine and there's no money in their account and they got paid and they saw the balance and it's no longer there. And so because there are no laws and because there aren't that requisite workforce in place with that high level of instant response, instant management, those high level skills, why report it? Who is actually going to investigate and how are they going to identify it? And that's a major challenge, right? Having not just the laws, the policies, but having the right people and the workforce in place to drive those type of protection needs.
Nicholas, care to weigh in?
I think Dustin mentioned it all. So if the national level is ready, then they should force or enforce what's there to comply with. But it has to start from the above going down, and then again go to see how the implementation of the laws is going. The law enforcement agency should be there checking. If you had a breach, why didn't you report? Probably find the companies why they didn't report, and then know how to handle the next time that they're having the attack.
So we're almost at the end of our podcast. If you're just joining us, even though you can go back to start from the beginning, we're talking about ransomware, how it is that person's online systems and their data is held for ransom, and hackers insisting that they pay some money to get it back. And we're talking about how to protect yourself from email phishing, how to look at a website to ensure that it's legitimate, not clicking online advertisements that may have certain malware embedded in it. So we're talking about all those things. Now, since we're going to be wrapping up, I'm going to get some closing comments from our panelists, just to see where your mind space is at. How do we move forward in the future? And any general comments you want to leave with our viewers and persons who have been listening to us. I'm going to start with you, Sakayo.
Thank you very much, Andre. I will still maintain for my last comment that the best tool that we need to do is to equip our users, employees with the tool. And to do that, you need to conduct awareness training, because if you teach a man how to fish, he will be a fisherman for all his life. But and also we need to change the mindset that cybersecurity is an ICT thing. That's not correct. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. So I think that's the intention is we try and change that mindset, and also looking at how we can actually equip our users, employees, or everyone in their family, so that they are able to know how to safely browse through the internet or use computers, or when they go online, they are able to know to pick up if any out of the ordinary that's actually been presented to them. So with that, they should be able to know, to pick that up. And the only way you can actually let your users or employees be able to detect that is by allowing them or training them through your awareness training program on security, so that they are able to actually help you, protect the business, protect the organization, and protect the public at large. Thank you, Andre, for the opportunity.
All right, Sakayo, your closing comments.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, I'd like to also thank the panelists. It's good to have this talk and also this platform. I think this is the best part of it, is we have a platform that we can share this. As Sakayo mentioned, that awareness is key. And having more of these podcasts and, including our Pacific region, it's a big boost, so that people will get that awareness and, change the mindset and the culture that the panelist has said. So, but in closing, I think for our IT managers and IT officers, having a plan in place, doing your backups, also. It's not only for the IT officers, but also the managers. Please, if protection needs funding, so that budget needs to be approved as well. So having that clear culture and getting budgets approved, it's a big plus for getting your network secured. But that's for me, having a plan and doing your backups. Thank you.
Nicholas?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Andrea, for the opportunity. And I want to give 4, if not 5 tips. Number 1, use supported softwares. Like if major attacks would have been stopped from the fact of using supported software. Number 2, apply patches. Dear security engineers, dear IT engineers, please patch your systems and your devices. Number 3, update vulnerable apps and make sure that they are really running current versions. Again, do run antiviruses and make sure they are updated as well. Last but not least, make sure you follow sites like Get Safe Online and follow podcasts like these ones to be at the top of what's going on around the world. Thank you.
Right, and Dustin.
Sure. Thank you very much, Get Safe Online, for this opportunity. Thank you to the panelists for sitting here with me. For me, it's twofold. From a national perspective, I would say, countries need to invest, not look at the investment in cybersecurity as a return on investment, and support that ecosystem. From the personal and the citizen perspective, you want to, of course, install applications that are trusted. Do not sideload applications. You want to install anti-malware, antivirus solutions, pay for them. Don't use only the free versions. Do not click on unsolicited links. And ultimately, when we think of the businesses, we want to ensure businesses have a continuity and management in terms of the business management, the continuity plans, enforce them, and drive your vulnerability management in addition to your change management plans. If you don't have them, start to implement them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dustin, and thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. Just to remind you that our guests were Dr. Dustin Fraser, Cyber and Information Technology Risk Expert in Guyana, Nicholas Iradukunda, Security Engineer and Operations Manager in Rwanda, Sakaya Manoa, IT Manager at the Solomon Islands, and Jobens Manoa, Principal IT Officer in Samoa. This podcast was brought to you by Get Safe Online, and you may visit their website to get more information about ransomware and other online safety tips at getsafeonline.org. And you can also follow them on social media platforms at Get Safe Online. My name is Andrea Chisholm. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, please stay safe when you go online.